Things at Starbase have been moving really quickly lately, and it's starting to look like the next Starship flight isn't far off. The clearest sign is Ship 39, now fully stacked with its entire heat shield system installed inside Megabay 2. Not far from there, Booster 19 is also coming together at a remarkable pace inside Megabay 1, and it just received a special new component that shows the build is progressing smoothly. So, how far along are these vehicles? And when exactly will Flight 12 take place? Let's dive into today's episode of Alpha Tech. We were supposed to be just about a month away from an exciting milestone, the long-awaited Starship Flight 12. This flight would have been special, featuring the brand new Starship version 3, Ship 39, paired with the version 3 Super Heavy, Booster 18. But everything changed after the incident on November 21st. During a pressure test, Booster 18's LOX tank catastrophically failed, ripping open its structure and leaving the entire vehicle beyond recovery. Not a single major section could be reused, so SpaceX had no choice but to cut it apart piece by piece using a laser torch and move the remains into storage. It wasn't until the afternoon of December 5th that the last remaining section of the booster was finally lifted by crane and moved to another test stand, on its way to complete recycling and to clear the area for what comes next. With Booster 18 gone, Booster 19 is now preparing to roll out from Megabay 1 to Massey's, where it will take on the cryogenic test that Booster 18 never got the chance to complete. But is Booster 19 really moving that fast? Of course not, at least not to that extreme. After the Booster 18 failure, SpaceX pushed the entire workforce to ramp things up, hard, because any delays now would threaten every major milestone planned for this year, reaching orbit, catching a Starship with the tower, and even attempting the first orbital refilling demo. And the pressure shows. On November 26th, just 5 days after the incident, the first section of Booster 19 rolled out of Star Factory and went straight into Megabay 1. The next day, the Common Dome section followed. On the 29th, they moved in the A3:4 section. On December 2nd, another section arrived. And by early morning, on December 4th, the A6:4 section made its way into MB1, quickly followed by the bottom half of the transfer tube. So, in just about 9 days, SpaceX rolled every major section needed to build an entire booster, a record-breaking pace, considering this process usually takes 1 to 3 months. And they didn't just roll the parts in, they actually stacked most of them. On December 7th, another key component entered Megabay 1, the massive fuel transfer tube, a piece so large it's about the diameter of a Falcon 9 booster. And what does that tell us? 4 sections are already stacked, and once that giant tube is mounted in place, they'll attach the Common Dome, finalize structural fittings, and begin installing plumbing, wiring, pneumatics, sensors, avionics, and all the internal systems. That phase alone should take another 1 to 2 weeks, meaning somewhere around December 23rd or 24th, Booster 19 should be structurally complete and ready for cryogenic testing at the end of the month. After that, what comes next? Booster 19 will be rolled from Massey's back to Megabay 1 to finish the remaining work, installing the grid fins, adding the catch points, and the part everyone's looking forward to, watching SpaceX bring in each Raptor 3 engine one by one to mount onto the booster. And even more exciting is the moment it finally rolls out to Launchpad 2. If SpaceX keeps up this steady, accelerated pace, that rollout is expected to happen around January 20th. So, what about Ship 39? The last time it showed up on camera was back in mid-November. At that point, it was just a bunch of separate sections that SpaceX was slowly stacking together inside Megabay 2. But recently, on December 8th, spotters caught it again, and this time, it was a completely different story. Ship 39 is now a fully stacked, seamless vehicle. The heat shield system is almost entirely installed, which is why it looks so dark, glossy, and honestly, pretty intimidating. And here's the wild part. For a brand new Block 3 vehicle, the team only started real progress around mid-August, when the S39 nose cone first rolled into Megabay 2 from the Star Factory. That means it took them just about 4 months to fully stack the largest rocket upper stage in the world, and not just any version, but a new variant with major design changes compared to Block 2. To put that in perspective, NASA's SLS upper stage can take anywhere from 2 to 4 years to complete. Of course, Ship 39 doesn't have its Raptor engines yet. It still needs a full round of hardware checkouts before it can roll out to masses, which is expected to happen by the end of this week. And fingers crossed that its test campaign won't repeat what Booster 18 had to go through. But things are looking positive. SpaceX already built a dedicated test tank called S39.1, which went through a full cryogenic test on the night of December 4th for roughly 7 hours. You can see the frost line barely shrinking throughout the test, a good sign that the tank held pressure well, kept its temperature stable, and didn't leak. These test tanks are usually built with the same propellant tank geometry as the real ship. They're meant for stress testing, pushing the structure to the limit before mass production. The goal is to confirm structural integrity and reliability under harsh spaceflight conditions, helping SpaceX avoid costly failures during full-scale launches. In other words, if S39.1 passes, Ship 39 is very likely to pass too, unless some unrelated issue pops up. Alright, after the cryo test wraps up, likely around December 16th or 17th, Ship 39 will probably head back into Megabay 2 to get its engines installed. And not just any engines, but the most powerful, most expensive methane engines on the planet. So, what happens next? It'll roll back out to masses for its static fire campaign. And this time, things should move faster. There's no need to bring it all the way to Launchpad 1. No need for all the complicated steps like mounting that stool on the OLM anymore. Speaking of the OLM, it's basically stripped down now. All the legs are gone, and crews have started clearing out the surrounding infrastructure. For example, compressed gas tanks from the Pad 1 deluge system are being removed one by one. Alright, that was a bit of a detour, but here's the simple version. If everything stays on track, Ship 39 should get its static fire in the last week of December, or early January 2026. After that, it'll be brought back in for final checkouts, payload installation, and FTS integration. And voila, it'll be ready for flight somewhere between January 24th and 27th, 2026. That's honestly not far off from the original timeline before Booster 18's incident, which means the SpaceX engineering teams are moving fast, pushing hard, and doing everything they can to keep momentum. So, hey, if you want to cheer them on, drop a Go SpaceX in the comments. Maybe it'll boost the schedule a little more. Oh, right, besides the vehicle itself, the launch pad is just as important. Pad 2 has been changing a lot lately. They even ran another round of flame deflector testing to make sure the whole system is in perfect shape before the next launch. And that's crucial, because this time, we're not dealing with 33 Raptor 2 engines anymore. We're dealing with 33 Raptor 3s. Super Heavy's liftoff force will be more than 22% stronger. It reminds me of Starship's very first test flight, IFT-1 in April 2023. Back then, Super Heavy was still using 33 Raptor 1 engines, yet it already produced around 7.5 million pounds of thrust, blasting out a firestorm with extreme heat and pressure. When it lifted off, it left behind a crater almost 9 meters deep, sending rocks and metal hundreds of meters away, shattering windows on SpaceX employees' cars, and shaking houses from 5 kilometers out. Elon Musk was thrilled because it showed how powerful the system was. But the aftermath gave him quite a headache. But thanks to that lesson, the new pad design is much tougher and far more advanced. The updated OLM structure is stronger. The water deluge system sprays around 7,000 gallons per second. And with the flame trench added, the insane power of Super Heavy Block 3 is now fully controlled. Anyway, long story short, Pad 2 is in good shape. There's just one unusual move SpaceX made on December 5th. They removed 2 huge hydraulic actuators from the Pad 2 chopsticks. Before that, just last week, the accumulators that support those actuators were also removed. This suggests SpaceX is inspecting and upgrading the entire hydraulic package. It's possible earlier tower tests revealed something like insufficient push force, slower response time, or uneven damping in the system. That would explain why they pulled the actuators for an upgrade, likely replacing them with higher flow, more stable, and more precise units. Nothing to worry about here. The actuators have been sent to the Sanchez site for work, and they're expected to be reinstalled once the upgrades are done. And honestly, this lines up perfectly with SpaceX gearing up for the first Starship Block 3 flights in early 2026, a period when the giant chopsticks will play a critical role in catching the booster and the ship. So, does that mean Flight 12 will feature both the Booster 19 catch and a Ship 39 catch? It would be incredible if SpaceX actually pulled it off. Imagine watching Booster 19 return just 7 minutes after launch, drop straight into Mechazilla's arms, and then slowly get lowered onto the transport stand. After cooling down, because its post-flight temperature is insanely high, B-19 would be rolled straight back into Megabay 1 for inspection. Then, later in the mission, Ship 39 would come down for its own landing attempt. If that catch works too, SpaceX would hit 2 historic milestones on the same flight: Starship reaching orbit successfully, and the first ever ship catch by the chopsticks. It would be a dream flight, the kind of moment fans would talk about for years. But honestly, the chances of that happening on Flight 12 aren't high. This is the very first test of the Starship Block 3 design, and nobody can predict what hidden risks might show up. Remember the early flights of the Block 2 ships? They immediately revealed major issues, resonance problems, leaks, and several vehicles blew up mid-air, triggering investigations, complaints, even lawsuits. That's completely normal in rocket development, but SpaceX will try to avoid unnecessary risks wherever possible. And even if Ship 39 performs flawlessly in orbit, things could still go wrong during the landing attempt. That's why splashdown in the ocean is still the safer, preferred choice for both the ship and the booster. Booster 19 itself is also carrying brand new upgrades. It'll attempt a belly flop landing after receiving that massive fuel transfer tube, and it's the first booster flying with only 3 grid fins instead of 4. With so many new variables packed into one flight, sending it to the ocean is simply the smarter move to protect the ground infrastructure. But no matter how these early Block 3 flights turn out, they're all stepping stones toward the real goal, the one Elon Musk has pushed for since day one: making humanity a multi-planet species. Elon Musk once explained why he became the richest person in the world. On X, he said, "A reminder that rapid evolution of technology is the only way to win. Those who don't innovate rapidly are doomed to fail." And he's right. It's all about upgrading, innovating, and pushing forward every single minute, every single second, without ever slowing down. Take Tesla, for example. In terms of hardware, it's not dramatically different from many other electric cars, but Musk pushed it to a completely different level, turning it into a smart, AI-driven vehicle that's now racing toward full 100% self-driving. That vision alone has put Tesla far ahead of most competitors. And the same mindset applies to rockets. Even though SpaceX already has Falcon 9, the most reliable and successful medium-lift rocket on Earth, they still pushed forward and built Starship, aiming for something far more powerful, more efficient, and dramatically cheaper. In fact, affordability has always been the real game changer. Back in the Apollo era, from 1961 to 1972, a single seat to space cost about $390 million. Today, SpaceX's Crew Dragon, far more modern and far more comfortable, brings that price down to roughly $55 million per seat. And the interesting part is, even with such a massive price drop, it still turns a profit. Musk understands this core principle better than anyone. That's why he recently shared an even more ambitious dream in a rather cryptic post. Instead of running AI on Earth, he suggested placing AI computers on satellites in sun-synchronous orbit, where solar power is abundant and completely free. If you launched 1 million of these satellites, each generating around 100 kilowatts of power, you'd have about 100 gigawatts of AI computing capacity in total, roughly 1/5 of California's entire electricity consumption. But Musk didn't stop there. He went as far as proposing a fully automated satellite factory on the moon, then using a mass driver, basically an electromagnetic railgun, to launch satellites off the lunar surface. No rockets needed, sending them straight into Earth orbit. This system could be scaled up 1,000-fold, and in Musk's vision, it's the kind of leap that could push humanity closer to becoming a Kardashev, Type 2 civilization, a society capable of harnessing the energy of an entire star. It sounds crazy, of course, but remember, back in the days when society was still primitive, countless geniuses were also called crazy for dreaming of flying like birds. Musk is no different. These people simply think decades ahead of everyone else. And he's not just talking, he's already moving toward that future, upgrading Starship to version 3, building the foundation that could bring this crazy dream a whole lot closer to reality. So, what exactly makes this new version so special? Compared to version 2, the one that completed 5 impressive test flights in 2025, with the last 2 finally succeeding thanks to major upgrades in heat protection and reusability, version 3 is a whole different beast. This new iteration introduces a complete redesign. The entire vehicle is now taller, standing at about 124.4 meters when fully stacked, up from 123.1 meters. The ship's height stays the same, but the super heavy booster is stretched by another 1.3 meters to accommodate much larger propellant tanks. And when you look closer at the booster, you can see how far SpaceX is pushing the limits. It now carries 33 upgraded Raptor 3 engines. Each one produces up to 280 tons of thrust at sea level, a huge jump from the Raptor 2's 230 tons. And it doesn't stop there. The Raptor 3 has been simplified dramatically. While a Raptor 2 weighs around 1,670 kilograms dry, the Raptor 3 is down to roughly 1,525 kilograms, with some internal sources saying the later batches have even dipped below 1,500. Multiply that by 33 engines, and Super Heavy Block 3 now delivers roughly 9,800 to 9,900 tons of thrust at liftoff, nearly 100 meganewtons. That's not only about 21 to 25% more powerful than Block 2, but also significantly lighter, shaving tens of tons off the booster's dry mass and reducing the amount of propellant needed to reach the same orbit. What does this mean in practice? It means Super Heavy can now push Starship tankers and the HLS variant to higher altitudes, carry heavier payloads, and cut down the number of orbital refueling flights required for moon mission cargo runs, directly supporting Musk's dream of building that lunar satellite production factory. That's the big picture. But it's not just about the new Raptors. There's also a massive downcomer inside the booster that carries liquid methane from the top of the tank all the way down to the engine bay. To give you a sense of scale, that single pipe is almost the size of an entire Falcon 9 stage. And what's impressive is that despite fitting such a huge structure inside, the booster's diameter hasn't changed. It's still 9 meters, fully compatible with every Starship booster ever built. Another major internal change is found in the liquid methane tank itself, which now includes reinforced structure on the inside. The previous generation used a little over 70 internal stringers, metal support beams, attached to the tank walls to maintain structural integrity. But in the new booster, SpaceX has increased that number to 96 stringers, giving the tank extra stiffness to handle higher pressures and more intense dynamic loads during ascent. But the most important thing about Super Heavy isn't just getting it off the ground, it's bringing it back. Full reusability is the whole point. And for that, SpaceX has made several big changes. The booster now goes from 4 grid fins down to 3, but each fin is roughly 50% larger and mounted lower on the structure. This helps reduce heating during stage separation and gives better control on the way down. And speaking of separation, the hot staging ring no longer gets thrown into the ocean. Instead, it's now integrated directly into the booster's common dome. That means no more wasting hardware, no more recovery headaches, and most importantly, much faster turnaround times between flights. Version 2 still required installing the ring manually before launch, but version 3 eliminates that entirely. And that matters a lot if Musk wants to launch hundreds of thousands of tons of Starlink satellites into orbit in a short amount of time. That's the booster's job. But deploying those satellites, that's Starship's mission. So, what exactly does the ship gain in this version 3 upgrade? First, SpaceX has optimized the ship's internal layout to boost its propellant capacity from about 1,500 tons to roughly 1,600 tons, all without changing the vehicle's height or diameter. That applies to the standard satellite deployment variant, but the tanker version goes even further, holding between 2,300 and 2,600 tons of propellant. How? By shortening and relocating the payload bay, trimming it from 5 rings down to just 3 or 4, and shifting part of it into the nose cone. This frees up about 3.66 meters of vertical space for larger tanks, increasing capacity without widening or lengthening the vehicle. Second, Ship V3 now features 4 dedicated downcomers, 3 feeding the RVAC engines and 1 central line for the 3 sea-level Raptors. All of them are vacuum jacketed to limit boil-off during long stays in orbit. These larger, more direct feed lines connect straight into the tanks, reducing wasted internal volume and improving propellant management. And that extra propellant really matters. With its tanks fully topped off in low Earth orbit, a refueled Starship can carry enough delta V to reach Mars. Around 1,200 tons would be burned on critical maneuvers, the translunar injection burn, mid-course corrections, and the controlled descent onto the lunar surface. Of course, for actual moon missions, two variants come into play: the Starship HLS for crew landings and the cargo Starship for transporting equipment. By the time an HLS or cargo ship arrives in lunar orbit, it's expected to still have around 300 to 400 tons of propellant left, enough to land a 100-ton payload safely and still keep reserves for the ascent back off the moon after the mission is complete. So even though V3 increases total propellant by only about 100 tons, that small upgrade provides the extra energy needed for precision maneuvers, stable landings, and, ultimately, the first uncrewed lunar missions SpaceX is targeting for 2026. But reaching the point where you can build a factory on the moon is still a long way off. Right now, SpaceX needs to focus on the immediate goal: getting satellites into orbit as fast as possible so they can start tapping into that free solar energy to power their AI systems in space. And that's why, in version 3, Starship gets a major upgrade in one of the most critical areas of all: its heat shield, the single component that decides whether Starship can be reused hundreds of times or not. For this new generation, SpaceX is believed to be testing a multi-layer thermal protection system, and at the center of it is something the community and even some SpaceX engineers jokingly call the crunch wrap. It's a flexible, ultra-heat-resistant composite layer placed directly beneath the ceramic hex tiles and into the gaps between them. While SpaceX hasn't revealed the exact recipe, many analysts believe it's made from ultra-fine silica fibers mixed with a high-temperature polymer and coated with a special carbon-phobic layer. The whole thing is only about 4 to 8 millimeters thick. During installation, the crunch wrap layer is applied wet onto the stainless steel skin. Then, the hex tiles are pressed into place, squeezing the material outward so it folds over the tile edges, sealing every gap, almost like wrapping a real Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme. When Starship slams into the plasma layer during re-entry, at temperatures between 1,600 and 2,000 degrees Celsius, this material doesn't burn. Instead, it enters a kind of controlled flex mode, compressing and then expanding slightly. This constant pressure keeps every tile locked in place and prevents any hot gas from sneaking underneath. And that's crucial because beneath that thin stainless steel skin lies wiring, avionics, plumbing, and critical components that cannot survive direct heat exposure. As long as the crunch wrap protects the steel, everything inside survives. All of this will be put to the test on Starship Flight 12, expected to lift off in the first quarter of 2026. This will be the very first test flight of the brand new Block 3 variant. The mission: send Booster 19 and Ship 39 into a suborbital trajectory, evaluate the upgraded thermal protection system, test in-space engine relight, and verify the stability of the redesigned structure. Time is like a river that never flows backward. It keeps pushing us forward, and if you can't keep up, you'll get swept away. In science, technology, or any industry, if your tools or your products don't evolve, they eventually become outdated. And in the aerospace world, SpaceX is the one setting the pace. They've built Dragon, the most advanced spacecraft transporting astronauts to the ISS. They created Falcon 9, the world's first partially reusable orbital rocket. And now, Starship is on its way to becoming the first fully reusable rocket ever made. That constant cycle of upgrading and reinventing is exactly what put SpaceX where it is today. And at the center of all this is Elon Musk, someone who thinks far beyond the limits most of us are used to. Recently, he posted a message essentially saying, if we already made it to the moon back in the Apollo era, why should we just repeat the past? Why not aim for something greater, like building an entire base up there? It might sound crazy and unbelievably difficult, but that's exactly the kind of challenge we need if we want today's spacecraft to truly break new ground and reach those bigger goals. And Musk isn't just talking, he's actually building the Starship Human Landing System, or HLS for short. This is a lunar lander with an insane level of innovation. To get a clearer picture, just compare it to the vehicle that once took humans to the moon, the Apollo lunar module. It was about 7 meters tall, weighed just 15 tons, carried exactly 2 astronauts, and touched down on the moon for only a few hours before lifting off again. It ran on hypergolic propellants, wasn't reusable, and each one was left behind in lunar orbit or on the surface after every mission. Meanwhile, the HLS Starship stands around 50 meters tall, with a landing mass between 100 and 150 tons. It's designed for 4 astronauts, but its internal volume is enormous. Theoretically, it could accommodate up to 100 people. It can carry multiple rovers, tens of tons of cargo, and a huge amount of scientific equipment. Simply put, Starship's interior volume is about 200 times larger than the Apollo command module. On top of that, HLS features an elevator for crew and cargo, a massive pressurized cabin, and life support systems that allow astronauts to live and work on the moon for up to a month. Because the leap in capability is so huge and they're building it from scratch, it naturally takes time. Even with delays, it's worth it, far beyond any other lander. Take Blue Moon Mark 1, a small testbed, not designed to carry the massive loads needed for construction or long-term habitation. And its old-school design will quickly become outdated. Starship, on the other hand, is built for heavy lifting. Its cargo capacity is a game changer. With that kind of lift, we're not just sending habitats, we can also bring pilot-scale factory equipment to test extracting water, oxygen, and even metals straight from the lunar surface. If Starship performs as planned, it could be the true turning point for in-situ resource utilization on the moon, a bold, entirely new mission profile. Right now, NASA is criticizing SpaceX for being slow with HLS, simply because they're in a hurry to beat China in the race back to the moon. But didn't we already do that 57 years ago? That's right. So why don't we just follow Musk's plan, like he said himself?
Anyway, we should have a Moonbase Alpha, which is the next step after the Apollo program would be to have a base on the moon.
So now we have Starship HLS, and there's the Moonbase Alpha plan. We pretty much know what the vehicle will be like, but what about the actual plan? The idea is that someday in the future, once SpaceX has mastered orbital refueling and Starship can land safely on the moon, perhaps as early as 2028, they'll start working on a base at the moon's south pole. The terrain is rough and uneven, but the region has plenty of ice deposits. Imagine this. After the HLS Starship touches down vertically on the lunar surface, the crew climbs out using an elevator, along with support tools, robots like Artemis, exploration rovers, and tons of equipment. Right next to the landing site, they begin assembling greenhouse-like habitats, similar to snow igloos in the Arctic, but on the moon. A few compact modules, a crew of astronauts living and working there for long durations, and all the systems needed to keep them safe and supported. Initially, the crew will stay inside HLS itself, since it covers all their immediate needs: oxygen, food, water, exercise. Gradually, they'll start building the external base. Once the infrastructure is stable, subsequent crews can arrive one by one. But here's the big question. How do we stay in contact with spacecraft on the way to the moon, or with people working on the surface? And once you're there, how do you get electricity? If you wanted to charge your phone, how would that even work? There are no outlets buried in the lunar soil. We're talking about building something like ports on Earth, places where landing ships can dock, unload cargo, and launch again safely and reliably. One major challenge is landing. Rocket exhaust kicks up a huge cloud of dust, and lunar dust is sharp. Once it's thrown into the air, it clings to and scratches everything around. Without an atmosphere to slow it down, it shoots out like shrapnel, capable of damaging nearby structures. Because of this, any HLS ships arriving later need to land at least 70 meters away from the base construction site, or they need some kind of protective measure, like special tarps that shield the infrastructure, keeping dust out while also blocking cosmic radiation. This is a big challenge because designing a moon base has to start by asking, what would daily life on the moon actually look like? But are we just going there to learn how to survive? Would that even be useful? Absolutely. The moon is just a stepping stone for Musk's bigger goal, sending 1 million people to Mars to live there. And since the moon's environment is far harsher than Mars, if we can survive on the moon, living on Mars will be much easier. The immediate plan is to create an Earth-like environment on the moon. First, food. Initially, crews will eat packaged meals sent from Earth. Meanwhile, they'll grow plants in greenhouses, crops NASA has studied for survival in space, like watercress, lettuce, tomatoes, and potatoes. But what about meat? They can't exactly bring cows or chickens to make fried chicken or steaks. Instead, astronauts will rely on 3D bioprinting to produce lab-grown meat, a technology already being developed by several agencies. Next, oxygen. One astronaut needs about 0.8 to 1 kilogram of oxygen per day to breathe. For a 4-person colony, that totals roughly 5 to 10 kilograms per day. Luckily, the moon soil contains plenty of oxygen. The best approach is in situ resource utilization, extracting resources directly from lunar regolith, specifically carbothermal reduction. Heating regolith with carbon from coal or methane at 1,500 to 1,700 degrees Celsius in a reactor to release oxygen. NASA has already demonstrated this using lunar soil brought back by Apollo missions. The drawback? It consumes a huge amount of energy. That's why a nuclear power plant on the moon will be essential. At the same time, this method could also produce liquid oxygen fuel for HLS, which is crucial for future Mars missions. After all, the return trip from Mars is incredibly long, so developing this capability on the moon is a critical step. The rest is simpler. Daily life, eating, living, holding meetings will still mostly take place inside HLS. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention, HLS itself can actually be used as part of the base, so you don't need to build too much from scratch, which saves a ton of resources. We can also use cargo starships to expand the base. The initial idea is that they'd land horizontally so they can immediately become part of the habitat, while HLS ships carrying crew would still land vertically, so they can take off again straight from the lunar surface. Plus, all these vehicles come with large solar panels and are integrated with Starlink technology. So, electricity for everyday life is already covered. This is essential for communicating with Earth or recycling water. Speaking of water, astronauts will actually need to recycle all their urine through filtration systems. It sounds gross, but after purification, it's completely clean and drinkable. Of course, this is all about resource efficiency, because water on the moon is mostly trapped in ice deposits. Mining it isn't easy, the temperatures are extremely low, there's no direct sunlight, and the ice is buried 1 to 2 meters underground. The safest approach is to rely on robots and solar power to extract it. Even though we've never built anything on the moon before, we're not starting from zero. We've already learned a lot from large-scale construction projects here on Earth. Techniques like geographic information systems allow us to analyze terrain and divide land into usable zones. That approach works just as well on the moon. A fully developed moon base could include areas for landing, cargo handling, maintenance, scientific labs, mining, power systems, habitats, even greenhouses and recreation spaces. These zones need to be organized to keep everything running smoothly, safely, and efficiently. And yes, redundancy is key. Having more than one landing pad, for example, keeps operations going if one pad fails or is in use. The infrastructure goes even deeper. Think about roads between zones, trenches for power and data cables, fuel pipelines, radiation shielding, blast walls, the list goes on. Once a site plan is solid, engineers can start identifying all the systems the base will need and break them down into specific design requirements. Sure, there are still major challenges to building a permanent moon base, but there are plenty of reasons why now, or in the next few years, is actually a perfect time to do it. HLS has experienced delays, but that's mostly from NASA's perspective. For humanity, this is an incredibly exciting breakthrough vehicle, even if it's delayed until 2030, or even if China lands on the moon first. It doesn't really matter. We've already done it before. Right now is all about preparing for an even greater mission, and only SpaceX, as the pioneering company, can build Moonbase Alpha. If you support this vision, drop a Go SpaceX in the comments. Every bit of support helps the engineers working day and night to shorten the path to this goal. And don't forget to subscribe if you found this video interesting and exciting. Back in 2024, when other space station projects still hadn't made much noise, like Vast Space's Haven Station, Blue Origin's Orbital Reef, or even Starlab from Starlab Space, Axiom Space quietly stood out as our best shot at the future of living and working in low Earth orbit. This is a private company with a surprising amount of NASA experience packed into its team, plus a healthy stream of funding from NASA contractors and private investors. They're not just dreaming big, they're working with NASA and following a bold but incredibly practical plan. Instead of building an entirely separate station from day one, Axiom is going to launch its first module directly to the ISS. Then they'll keep adding one module at a time until the Axiom station becomes fully operational and completely independent. And when the ISS finally begins its fiery descent back to Earth, Axiom will detach, float free, and carry human presence in space forward without missing a beat. That's right, this is an incredibly exciting project. But here's the problem. The people managing and building the ASS project aren't exactly the most competent. This is Michael Suffredini. He spent 3 decades at NASA and served as the ISS program manager from 2005 to 2015, directly overseeing the station's transition from assembly to full operations. In 2016, he teamed up with billionaire Cam Ghaffarian, head of NASA's second-largest engineering services contractor, the group responsible for astronaut training and ISS operations. Eager to speed things up, Mike went on a massive hiring spree. By early 2024, Axiom had close to 1,000 employees, all aimed at hitting their ambitious goal, launching the first payload power thermal module and docking it to the ISS within the year. But obviously they didn't make it. Why? Because they hired way faster than they built. Many new engineers had nothing to do, while the company was burning through nearly $10 million a month just in salaries. That forced a major round of layoffs, roughly 100 employees, and for the remaining staff, Axiom even floated the idea of paying part of their compensation in company stock just to keep talent from leaving. And luckily by 2025, things finally started settling into a stable orbit. Employees were getting paid on time again, and although the project is still behind the original schedule, it has recently made some very promising progress. Their latest update on X came at the end of July, where they posted, "From the first to the final weld on Axiom Station's payload, power and thermal module took the Thales Alenia space team only about 250 days. Yep, roughly 8 months to complete the main welding phase. That's actually impressive, and it really shows how effective the international partnership with Italy has been. It also helps rebuild confidence from NASA and from all of us, while making it easier for Axiom to attract new investors." And just a week later, they posted another update. After last week's final weld, the Thales Alenia space team will connect the aft and forward sections of the PPTM primary structure, conduct flight certification tests, and ready the pressure vessel for its trip to Houston for systems integration. It's now been about 4 months without any new updates on the PPTM module, but that's pretty normal. This phase usually stretches until late December or even early 2026. After that, the module will be rolled to Houston for the systems integration stage, where Axiom will install the interior, hardware, and electrical systems. That whole process is expected to take 18 to 24 months, which means the launch is currently net, late 2027 on a SpaceX Falcon 9. Once it docks with the ISS, it'll eventually detach and begin free flight together with the Habitat 1 module in early 2028. Speaking of SpaceX, Axiom's relationship with them is almost as tight as SpaceX's partnership with Vast Space. Besides buying Falcon 9 launch services, Axiom also signed deals back in 2020 to 2021 to use Crew Dragon for their crewed missions, from Axiom 1 all the way through Axiom 4. Recent updates from 2024 to 2025 show that SpaceX is even considering using Starship for Axiom's larger future modules, like the XRMF, since Starship can haul over 100 tons and is fully reusable, which could slash long-term costs. There's no firm schedule yet, of course, since Starship is still in testing. But for now, Axiom has already locked in Crew Dragon as their future shuttle between Earth and their station. Honestly, a few years from now, SpaceX's manifest is going to be packed. Not only do they have to support ISS missions, they'll be launching for both Vast and Axiom. Just thinking about the logistics is a headache, but a profitable one for SpaceX. And beyond profit, their influence in the space industry is only going to multiply. So, back to the ASS station. We already know their first module headed to the ISS will be the PPTM. But why that one? Why launch it first? Well, the main reason is docking logistics. Originally, Habitat 1 was supposed to dock to the forward port of the ISS. But that same port is also reserved for SpaceX's deorbit vehicle. That means Habitat 1 would have required moving adapters around. A messy, expensive process that could drag on for months. By launching the PPTM first, Axiom avoids all of that. The PPTM, about 11 meters long and 4.2 meters wide, can dock to the nadir port of Node 1 or Node 2, which is usually used for cargo vehicles. This lets the module live alongside the future deorbit spacecraft without blocking anything. On top of that, PPTM immediately brings power, thermal control, and larger payload capacity than HAB-1. That makes it much easier to transfer equipment and scientific experiments from the ISS to the Axiom station as it grows, keeping microgravity research going without interruption. And since the PPTM acts as the station's heart, it's designed to deliver power and thermal control at a level comparable to the entire ISS. It uses rollout solar arrays from Redwire, a radiator-based cooling system, and 8 science racks for storing and operating research payloads. Only after that will Axiom launch the remaining 4 modules: Habitat 1, the airlock, Habitat 2, and the RMF. Among the 4 remaining modules, the 2 we should pay the most attention to are Habitat 1 and Habitat 2. These are the primary living and working spaces for the station's crew. They're designed to offer a more comfortable environment, support crew health, and enable basic research, a clear shift from the ISS modules, which were built mainly for long-term international science with much more complex layouts. Let's start with HAB-1, the station's first core living module. It's planned to launch in 2028 after the PPTM. The module is about 11 meters long and 4.2 meters in diameter, roughly the size of a smaller ISS module like Harmony. That gives it around 50 to 60 cubic meters of usable volume, enough for a crew of 4. Inside, HAB-1 features 4 private crew quarters, each with a large window looking down on Earth, touchscreen communication panels, a galley with a microwave and specialized fridge, and exercise equipment to counter muscle loss. Things like a treadmill and a vibration-isolated stationary bike. The standout tech here includes independent navigation and control systems, plus its own set of small thrusters for orbit adjustments. Speaking of thrusters, just last month, Axiom was testing the propulsion system for the PPTM. That module will use 32 powerful Mark 8 engines to boost the entire station without relying on visiting spacecraft. Back to HAB-1, it's fitted with 4 flexible radial ports. 2 are used for connecting to future Axiom modules, and the other 2 are for visiting vehicles like Crew Dragon. This setup lets HAB-1 operate more like a standalone spacecraft, instead of something that depends heavily on ISS infrastructure. Now next comes HAB-2, launching around 2029. It expands the station's living space with a layout similar to HAB-1, but with several major upgrades. This module will carry a full environmental control and life support system, capable of recycling up to 98% of water and air, a big step up from the ISS's roughly 90%. It will also feature high-speed commercial satellite communications for real-time data transfer. But the standout feature is the remote robotic arm. HAB-2 will carry its own remote manipulator system, similar in concept to Canadarm3, allowing the crew to assist with module assembly or perform maintenance outside the station. With this addition, the total capacity of the habitats rises to 8 people, adding 4 more crew quarters and an expanded workspace. That shift turns the station into a true multi-purpose platform for space tourism and commercial manufacturing. Compared to the ISS, where modules like Destiny or Harmony are larger but built with rigid, highly interdependent systems, Axiom's habitats take a completely different approach. They're designed to be modular, detachable, and expandable without major reconfiguration. And from the start, Axiom embraced an economic model. Government research is still part of the plan, but paying customers and private missions are a core business. That gives ASS the potential to operate freely after 2028, at roughly 1/3 the cost of the ISS, while maintaining high-end scientific capability. And unlike Blue Origin, whose New Shepard flights offer just a few minutes of weightlessness, Axiom is aiming for something far more immersive, a true astronaut-style experience, complete with a room overlooking Earth from orbit. For future space tourists, that's in a completely different league. And Axiom isn't stopping there. They're also building something just as groundbreaking, the Axiom Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or Axiom, a next-generation spacesuit designed specifically for NASA's Artemis missions on the Moon. This suit proved itself during its very first thermal vacuum test on November 20th, 2025, inside KBR's lab in San Antonio, Texas, the same facility that once trained Apollo astronauts. It's a pretty symbolic moment, showing just how far spacesuit technology has evolved while still carrying that legacy forward. And yes, the Axiom has already gone through underwater simulations, the kind of training that pushes suits to their limits. Water can't get inside it, so moon dust definitely won't stand a chance. What makes Axiom stand out is its set of real, practical upgrades, advanced materials that can survive extreme temperatures, a modular design that works for all kinds of mission profiles, and the ability to fit a much wider range of astronaut body sizes. It won't be long before we finally get to see all 33 Raptor 3 engines roaring to life on Booster 19, along with 6 more Raptor 3s on Ship 39 for Starship Flight 12, a mission SpaceX is targeting for the first quarter of 2026. And this flight is shaping up to be something special. We're talking about the most advanced, most powerful engines on Earth, mounted on the biggest rocket ever built. Everything about this test is aimed at one goal, getting ready for something far more ambitious, using Raptor 3 on the Starship HLS lander to take humans back to the moon. But because that mission is insanely difficult and packed with risks, SpaceX needs to prepare carefully. And on December 4th, they gave us a pretty big surprise. A brand new test video of the Raptor 3 firing at the McGregor facility in Texas. The engine ran for 6 minutes and 40 seconds, the longest continuous burn SpaceX has ever done. Not a short ignition test, not a relight, but a full duration burn meant to simulate real Starship conditions. As SpaceX explained, validation testing on a Raptor 3 performing a Starship V3 ascent burn. Multiple versions of this test will cover the different conditions seen by Starship's 3 inner engines during its initial climb to space. And if you look closely, that steady blue-white flame already tells you everything. It's the full-flow stage combustion cycle running exactly the way it's supposed to. And right above that 1,000-degree plume, you can actually see a thin layer of white frost forming on the engine's fuel plumbing. That's the cooling system at work, keeping the metal cold enough that the engine doesn't even need a heat shield, something we'll talk about in a moment. But first, check out the serial number printed on the engine, 75. That means at least 75 Raptor 3 engines have been built so far. In reality, the number is probably closer to 100, maybe even more, basically enough for around 3 full Starship flights, since each Starship Super Heavy stack needs 39 engines. It's not an insane pace, but consider this. The very first Raptor 3, serial number 1, only showed up on August 3rd, 2024. And in just a little over a year, SpaceX has gone from the first prototype to full-scale production. That's a wild amount of progress in such a short time. But now comes the part that really matters. What makes this engine truly different from Raptor 2? Well, basically, Raptor 2 was the test bed, the version SpaceX used to push Starship through its early flights. Raptor 3, on the other hand, is the engine meant to take humans to other worlds. And Elon Musk actually said it himself just yesterday. The most advanced rocket engine ever made by far. Raptor 3 and subsequent versions will make life multiplanetary and progress civilization towards Kardashev 2. To reach a goal that ambitious, the first and most important thing SpaceX had to tackle was performance and mass. Those two factors drive everything. And when it comes to weight, Raptor 3 is significantly lighter thanks to a full redesign that removes bulky heat shields and simplifies the entire layout of the engine. Each unit is about 1.1 tons lighter than Raptor 2. Multiply that by 39 engines, 33 on Super Heavy and 6 on Starship, and the total mass savings becomes huge. Data from last year already hinted at this. Raptor 3 weighs 1.525 tons, compared to 2.08 tons for Raptor 1 and 1.63 tons for Raptor 2. Cutting that much mass directly boosts payload capacity and improves overall flight performance. But how did they pull it off? It's because with Raptor 3, SpaceX completely eliminated the heat shield and reworked the propellant plumbing. That alone is a massive leap in reliability. The simplified, more integrated design makes the engine far more robust, reducing the kinds of issues we used to see on super heavy flights. For example, Raptor 2 often struggled with engine relights after stage separation, something Raptor 3 handles much better thanks to those simplifications. Every mission has brought improvements, but the truth is, the Raptor family still had lingering issues, until now, hopefully. The streamlined Raptor 3 is built to push future flights to a much higher success rate, and a flawless first flight would be a major milestone. Elon Musk also mentioned in an interview that SpaceX ditched traditional flanges and switched to welding. Bolts, screws, and flanges make engines easier to assemble and take apart, but they also add failure points, places where leaks form, heat builds up, and structural weaknesses appear. Welding removes all of that, making the engine far tougher during extreme conditions like liftoff and re-entry. It does make maintenance harder, but it forces SpaceX to refine the engine design so well that it needs less frequent servicing anyway. And all those upgrades come with big benefits. Musk confidently said Raptor 3 is lighter, stronger, and more efficient than Raptor 2. Now, let's talk raw power. Musk summarized it perfectly in a post back in March. Raptor 3 will aim for 300 tons of thrust at liftoff, so 10,000 tons of combined thrust for 33 engines. That one sentence already turns heads. Raptor 3 isn't just stronger and more reliable, it delivers those improvements while slashing cost by 75%. In the rocket engine world, where progress is usually slow and expensive, a jump like that barely sounds real. The reliability gains show up both technically and visually in the redesigned structure, the integrated components, the cleaner layout. But the real headline is the thrust increase. Raptor 3 now produces 280 tons of thrust at sea level and 306 tons in vacuum. For context, that's nearly double the 185 tons from the original Raptor 1, and significantly higher than Raptor 2, which hit 230 tons at sea level and 258 tons in vacuum. And this is just the beginning. That performance gap is expected to grow even wider as SpaceX continues refining the engine. So, what do those numbers actually mean for lunar missions? Well, here's the quick recap. Raptor 3 is now hitting around 280 tons of thrust at sea level, which is more than a 20% boost over Raptor 2. And it's not just raw power, the efficiency is better too. Its specific impulse climbs from about 327 to 335 seconds at sea level, and from 350 to roughly 360 seconds in vacuum. But what does that translate to in the real world? With the same amount of propellant, about 3,400 tons of methalox in super heavy and roughly 1,200 to 1,300 tons in a Starship tanker, those improvements in thrust and ASP actually give the whole system a lot more delta V than you'd expect. If you plug the numbers into the Tsiolkovsky rocket equation, even just a 2.5 to 3% bump in average, ISP, translates to something like 100 to 130 meters per second of extra delta V, when the whole stack is fully fueled. And when you add the raw power boost from Raptor 3 on top of that, Super Heavy is basically leaving the pad with way more muscle. And that really matters because more thrust means Starship reaches higher speed and altitude before MECO. That cuts down gravity losses by a lot, around another 200 to 300 meters per second saved. So when you add all three effects together, more thrust, higher ISP, and less gravity loss thanks to a shorter, harder first stage burn, the whole Super Heavy and Starship stack ends up gaining 500 to 600 meters per second of delta V compared to the Raptor 2 setup. And as you know, delta V is everything when your mission depends on orbital refueling. For Starship HLS, the one that will actually land astronauts on the moon, NASA's early estimates suggested something like 15 tanker flights running Raptor 2 engines to fill up the roughly 1,500 tons of propellant needed for the lunar transfer. But with Raptor 3, that drops way down to around 7 to 10 flights, maybe even less as the engine continues to improve. There's more. With Raptor 3, Starship HLS uses less propellant just to reach orbit. It can reach LEO, dock with the orbital refueling system, top off its tanks faster, and head for lunar orbit without needing any redesign beyond replacing all 39 engines with Raptor 3 units. In short, upgrading from Raptor 2 to Raptor 3 alone boosts overall performance and fuel efficiency enough to shift Starship from a system that needs a long list of refueling flights just to reach the moon into one that's far simpler and fully capable of meeting the requirements of Artemis 3 and the missions that come after. So when are we actually going to see that future? Maybe sooner than most people think. As Starship moves into its version 3 configuration, taller, lighter, and built to carry heavier payloads, the Raptor 3 engine will finally come into play. The first V2 Starship, Ship 33, already flew on Flight 7 back in January 2025 alongside Booster 14. On the super heavy side, Booster 17 was the last V2 unit. Booster 18 was supposed to be the first V3 booster, but it suffered a LOX tank failure during testing in November 2025 and had to be scrapped. Here's where things get interesting. Booster 19, the first true V3 booster, comes with a redesigned engine bay built specifically to support the Raptor 3. SpaceX has confirmed that B-19 is now assigned to Flight 12, replacing the failed B-18, while Booster 14 might even be reused for earlier flights like Flight 9 or 10. If SpaceX maintains its pace of one launch every 1 to 2 months, Flight 12 could happen in Q1 2026, as early as February or March. That means the first Starship flight powered by Raptor 3 could take place in early 2026, marking a major milestone toward the long-term goal, full and rapid reusability. But the first flight isn't the real test. The real question is whether Raptor 3 can deliver fast, reliable reuse. Elon Musk keeps repeating the same point. Full and rapid reusability is the only way Starship becomes economically viable. Being able to reuse engines with minimal refurbishment will decide how fast SpaceX can scale, and Raptor 3 was designed with exactly that in mind. If it performs the way SpaceX hopes, we might soon see regular booster landings and quick turnarounds, a huge step toward making spaceflight feel a lot more like air travel. Imagine a future where Starship launches several times a month, sending satellites, cargo, and eventually people into orbit and beyond. That's the future SpaceX is chasing, and Raptor 3 is the engine that could make it happen. But Raptor 3 is only one piece of the puzzle. SpaceX still has to prove out the whole ecosystem: the tanker variant, the depot variant, the cargo variant, and eventually the HLS lander itself. Once all of these vehicles are tested and validated, SpaceX will finally have the toolbox it needs, not just to send crews from Earth to the moon, but to deliver hundreds of tons of materials to start building a permanent lunar base. For SpaceX to reach where it is today, the company had to eat a lot of bitter moments and humiliation. People only see the glory now, but hardly anyone remembers just how much disrespect they faced in those early years. Back in 2001, when Elon Musk was still a young entrepreneur with a crazy dream about Mars, he flew to Moscow 3 times with his team, carrying suitcases full of cash, hoping to buy a rocket. But when Musk offered $8 million for 2 missiles, the Russian negotiators looked at him with a mocking grin, called him a young boy, and bluntly said no. They didn't believe he even had the money. One chief designer even spat at him, thinking Musk was just talking nonsense, and not serious at all. On another trip, still hoping to close a deal, Musk agreed to pay $21 million for 3 rockets. But the Russians suddenly raised the price to $21 million for just one, then laughed at him, treating him like some clueless kid trying to buy a weapon he didn't know how to use. Musk walked away empty-handed. That humiliation was the turning point. Musk turned to his colleague Jim Cantrell and said, "If we can't buy one, we can build one ourselves." And that's how SpaceX was born in 2002. Its very first rocket, Falcon 1, reached its test flight in March 2006, just 4 years later. 4 years, with a team that practically knew nothing about rockets. Pretty insane, right? But those 4 years weren't smooth at all. Musk was mocked by other companies too. Boeing and Lockheed Martin called SpaceX a bunch of kids playing with toys. ULA executives even told the US government, "Don't sign anything with SpaceX, they'll go bankrupt within a year. They'll never launch anything." That's why, in 2004, Musk brought a Falcon 1 model to NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., trying to secure a test launch contract. A senior NASA official literally laughed in his face and said, "Young man, you're very smart, but you don't understand rocketry. Go away." All that hate and dismissal only pushed Musk even harder, and that grit became the foundation for Falcon 1's first successful flight in September 2008, the moment that forced the industry to finally look at SpaceX differently. Just 2 years later, the Falcon 9 was born, making its maiden flight in June 2010 and successfully deploying the Dragon qualification unit, the first step toward the Dragon spacecraft we know today. Then in 2012, Falcon 9 launched Dragon to the ISS for a NASA resupply mission, securing a $1.6 billion CRS contract that pulled SpaceX out of bankruptcy. And then 2015 happened. They stuck the first ever Falcon 9 landing, proving the rocket could be reused. A few months later, in April 2016, they even nailed the landing on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean. At that point, every company that once mocked SpaceX had no choice but to swallow their own words. And today, Falcon 9 pulled off 160 launches just in 2025, capturing more than 90% of all global launches. Booster B-1067 alone set a record with 32 flights, saving SpaceX billions thanks to reuse. In total, the Falcon family, including Falcon Heavy, has reached 588 launches with a success rate above 99%. Tell me, has any other company on Earth come even close to something like that? The answer is absolutely not. No one but SpaceX. Now, look at the folks who used to look down on them. Russia. Their space industry has been fading, dragged down by war and a collapsing economy. They can't keep up with SpaceX anymore. Roscosmos even managed to damage the only Soyuz launchpad to the ISS. Boeing, once seen as the giant towering over SpaceX with a history dating back to 1916, yet look where they are now. Starliner, their ISS crew transport vehicle, ran into problem after problem, despite billions in taxpayer money, and in the end, SpaceX's Dragon had to step in and clean up the mess when Starliner stranded 2 astronauts. ULA? Back in 2014 to 2015, SpaceX sued the U.S. Air Force for favoring ULA by letting them buy Russian RD-180 engines without competition. Musk even called ULA a monopoly, and the lawsuit exposed that ULA was receiving billions in subsidies just to keep prices sky high. And the result? SpaceX won the case, earned the right to compete in the National Security Space Launch Program, and forced ULA to cut 25% of its workforce, around 1,000 jobs, while losing a massive share of the market. From that point on, ULA has never been able to compete with SpaceX again. And here's the fun part. ULA CEO Michael Gass once harshly criticized SpaceX for allegedly cutting deals with Russia, which triggered a full investigation by Congress. The outcome? Gass was fired the very next day. So yeah, one by one, every company that used to take shots at SpaceX ended up eating dust as SpaceX just kept moving faster and faster. And just 2 days ago, Elon Musk was reportedly looking to raise more than $25 billion through SpaceX's first ever IPO, planned for 2026. If that happens, the company's valuation could shoot past $1 trillion, putting it on the same level as Tesla. And in the near future, it might even climb past giants like Meta or Microsoft. Do you think that's actually possible? If you do, drop a 1 in the comments and let me know. All right, back to the story. With Falcon 9's success, Musk never saw it as the finish line. He believed he could build a rocket that was far more powerful, far more efficient, and 5 to 10 times cheaper than Falcon 9. And that belief led to the birth of Starship. Of course, the idea of Starship had been in his mind for a long time. He chose Texas as the place to build it, buying a patch of land near the Mexican border simply because it was cheap, nothing but wetlands and empty ground. But surprisingly, he received strong support from local officials who helped him non-stop. In 2014, they assisted him with filling the area with sand, stabilizing the muddy ground, and building the foundation. By 2018, SpaceX finally began major construction there, starting with the assembly hangar and the tank farm. In 2019, Starbase officially took shape, transforming from empty land into a test site with paved roads and temporary housing for 100 to 200 employees. That same year, they built Starhopper, the earliest ancestor of Starship, 9 meters tall, 200 tons, made of stainless steel. It looked like a giant metal drum with 3 landing legs and an early Raptor engine. It completed a few low-altitude hop tests, and honestly, it looked pretty funny, but incredibly important. By the end of that year, they built several other prototypes, including Mk1, redesigned with a pointed nose and standing 50 meters tall, but it exploded during a cryogenic pressure test. From there, new versions kept coming. SN5 flew to 150 meters. SN10 completed a 10-kilometer flight and even landed successfully, before exploding a few seconds later. Just 3 years after Starhopper, SpaceX had developed the full 2-stage Starship system, Super Heavy and Starship, what we now call version 1. Then came version 2, which didn't last long, and now we're entering the version 3 era. Looking back at Starship's 6-year journey, it's insane how fast they've moved, from a 9-meter flying barrel to the tallest rocket ever built, standing 124.4 meters in its version 3 configuration. That's not just progress, that's a leap forward on a whole different scale. And here's the wild part. In just 1 or 2 more years, once Starship version 3 becomes fully stable and capable of total reuse, meaning both stages can come back down and land on Mechazilla, it won't just replace Falcon 9. It will basically erase every cost model the space industry has ever known. Right now, a Falcon 9 launch costs about $67 million to put a little over 20 tons into low Earth orbit, roughly 26 to 27 Starlink 5.2 minis. Starship will be able to throw 100 to 150 tons to orbit for just a fraction of that price, maybe just a few tens of millions. And by the end of this decade, once everything is fully reusable and produced in volume, it could drop below $10 million per launch. That means the price per kilogram to orbit will crash from over $3,000 to just a few dozen dollars. So cheap that people won't even talk about launch costs anymore. They'll only talk about fuel and maintenance. And that's comparing it to Falcon 9. Go back to NASA's Space Shuttle glory days. That thing cost $54,500 per kilogram. Just hearing that number makes you feel bad for the taxpayers who had to foot the bill. Once Starship enters full operational service, Starlink deployment is going to explode in scale. Global bandwidth will grow exponentially. NASA contracts, US military missions, commercial customers, they will all default to Starship, simply because no one else can compete on price or payload. Yes, Starship was built to make money for SpaceX, but its real purpose is still the Moon and Mars, where Elon Musk has parked dreams that could cost hundreds of billions of dollars to pull off. Mars is the ultimate goal, of course, but right now he's treating the Moon as a stepping stone. At the moment, Musk is floating an idea to build a factory on the lunar surface to mass-produce solar-powered AI satellites. We're talking about an insane output, up to 100 terawatt-hours per year. Instead of launching everything from Earth, which is expensive and risky, these lunar factories would use a mass driver, basically a magnetic railgun, to shoot satellites straight into orbit without rockets. No fuel, no booster, just pure electromagnetic acceleration. This isn't just about boosting Starlink. It's also a not-so-small step toward a Type 2 Kardashev civilization, where humanity taps into the energy of an entire star system. Musk even ties this idea into his orbital data center plan, predicting SpaceX could eventually produce 1 megaton of AI satellites per year, with the Moon acting as the main factory to avoid Earth's resource limits. It's still in the concept phase, sure, but with Starship getting closer to carrying cargo to the lunar surface under NASA's Artemis program, this could become real within the next few decades, turning what sounds like sci-fi into Musk's next business plan. So, what's the end game? Mars. He always says that if we never leave Earth, humanity's future will stay trapped inside a fragile single egg. Musk imagines a self-sustaining city on the red planet, with millions of residents, a place where people mine local resources to make fuel, air, and food. It would start with uncrewed cargo missions and fleets of Optimus robots building the first layers of infrastructure, then gradually scale up to thousands of people traveling there on regular flights. The long-term target? 1 million people on Mars by 2050, forming a society that can stand on its